everyone. Welcome to Cash Up, a weekly show where we converse with amazing folks in DFIR, and today is no exception. Today I'm joined by Tarah Melton. Tarah happens to be a colleague of mine at Magnet Forensics, where she works as a forensic consultant. You may know her from the numerous talks she's been doing all over on memory forensics. Prior to joining Magnet, Tarah worked as a forensics examiner in multiple counterterrorism labs, including doing several deployments as part of that mission. This is actually where I first met Tarah. I've had the distinct joy of getting to work with Tarah at two different organizations, years apart in completely different roles. Tarah is a graduate of Bloomsburg University's Computer Forensics program, which, if you were unaware, that program is currently nominated for a Forensic Forecast Award. Forensic Forecast Award voting is actually open all this week. If anyone's interested, the awards will be given on Friday at the DFIR Summit. And in addition to those roles in education, Tarah also is a fur baby mama. And this includes a cat named Mace, who has weaved its way into several pieces of content, from being in forensic images to being live on talks. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mace made an appearance today. And with that, this is Tarah.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Jess. What a great intro.
Well, like I said, I'm really lucky to know you and get to talk to you on a regular basis and get to collaborate with you. And what other people might not know is how you got to where you are here at Magnet doing this really unique, cool role. So what was kind of your path in forensics?
So honestly, I feel like when people ask me this question, I always kind of preface it with my path to forensics is kind of a little bit boring. But once I actually got into forensics, it got a little bit more interesting. But basically, when I was in high school, when I was just a young 17, 18-year-old, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. So I was actually in a club in high school that took me to different campuses around Pennsylvania, where I grew up. I grew up in Pennsylvania, different state schools. And I distinctly remember visiting the campus of Bloomsburg University that you just talked about, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And so I went to a community college for 2 years just to kind of knock out my gen eds, because like I said, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
And smarter from a cost perspective.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, I just lived at home, saved some money. Yep, for sure. But when the time came that I needed to transfer somewhere, and I just remember how much I loved Bloomsburg, that was kind of the first place I researched, and they had just developed this digital forensics program. I had no idea what digital forensics was, I'm not going to lie. But I was like, that sounds pretty interesting. So that person that loved to watch like the forensic shows of like case files and things like that, like not like CSI, but like the real stuff, like forensic files and things like that.
Yeah.
So like I found it really interesting. I started researching what digital forensics actually was. And I was like, this is really cool. I think this is something I'd actually really enjoy. And so I transferred, and basically the rest is history. I started learning about forensics, and I remember my first few classes at Bloomsburg, learning about the different file systems and how they were structured and things like that. And I was just like, yeah, this is really cool. It's like basically a big puzzle piece, putting things together, and
totally.
Where the artifacts are coming from and how everything gets saved and everything like that. So I found it really fascinating in that respect. And I actually fell in love with it. So it was kind of this random weird path that I just kind of fell into. My career into forensics after university was interesting in that, like, because I watched all these shows, like I said, like I watched these shows about cases being worked and everything like that. I always thought I would end up in like maybe a law enforcement role. And because I knocked all those gen eds out of the way in the community college, I had all this extra time to spend in other classes. So I got a minor in criminal justice because I thought maybe I'd go into the law enforcement role. Too, so I took a bunch of accounting classes and things like that. So I thought maybe I'd maybe go that direction too, in like the financial crimes or something like that. So that was kind of what I thought was going to happen. But about a year and a half before I graduated, I distinctly remember my professor, Dr. Hartung, he will probably never watch this, but him coming to class and just telling us, hey, there's this internship that you guys might want to think to apply for. And it was for the FBI. And I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to get an internship to the FBI, but whatever, I'll try anyway. And at that point, I was just applying to everything. I was emailing different police departments and different companies and law firms and just anywhere I could like maybe potentially get an internship. And in doing that, I also found an internship with the NSA as well. And again, I'm like, there's no way I'm ever going to get these internships, but whatever, I'll just apply anyway and see what happens. And that basically literally changed my entire life and career path going forward, because I ended up getting both those internships, and I had to choose between the two, and I ended up going down to the NSA internship, and that basically shaped my entire career, which I never saw coming. If you would ask me when I was in high school, I was like, no, that's not where I'm going. But yeah.
Well, that's a really, really good point, though, because when you actually apply to internships and when you're first starting to get your feet wet in DFIR, and you're in InfoSec General or whatever, you don't know exactly where you're going to end up, right? Like there's a lot of people who kind of it's one thing if you go and you apply to the academy and you know that you're going into the policing or whatever, but when you take internships, you learn so much more about your skills. So now you do this internship at NSA. How does that turn into you becoming where you are today? What was kind of the next step?
So luckily that was able to get me a security clearance. So I was able to go, so that was the summer before I graduated. I actually just graduated in December. So I had one semester after that internship. So immediately after I graduated, I was able to get a job as a government contractor, basically supporting counterterrorism roles and things like that.
So what's really cool about that is by the time you applied for your first role, you already had experience because of the internship. You had a degree in the field, and you had a security clearance. Degree in forensics, and so getting an internship, and that having to be an internship with a clearance, you really set yourself up to be highly employable. I know when I used to run contracting teams in the government for forensics, that it was really difficult to find junior folks who already had a clearance. And that is just such a leg up on a position. So people who had done internships with other agencies, they were prime candidates for pulling in. So.
And that just goes to show you, like I said, I'm from this tiny town and like this tiny school in Pennsylvania that no one's ever heard of, Bloomsburg University. And that's kind of why I was like, there's no way I'm ever going to get these internships. There's no way. Like they set us up with rooming when we were there for the summer, and my roommates that they set me up with are people from like Princeton and Harvard, like MIT, and I was like from this tiny school in Pennsylvania that no one's ever heard of. So I was like, this is crazy. But that just goes to show you, just apply for everything because you never know what's going to happen. It's so important.
But important to note, right? Those Harvard and Princeton, to the best of my knowledge, don't have digital forensics curriculums.
No. They were in a different program. One was a lawyer and one was
that if you go to Bloomsburg or GMU or Davenport or the plethora of schools, Lemoyne in Tennessee, the plethora of schools that have digital forensics programs, that apply for internships, and don't be discredited by the fact that you're not at an Ivy, because Ivies don't have digital forensics programs.
Yeah.
So the fact that you're at a school that has a good digital forensics program, and there are some quite well-known forensics examiners who have been graduates. So people who blog and publish, like Kevin Pagano, Sarah, I can't pronounce your last name, Kay, who is giving a talk
at the Summit. Shout out.
Thank you. and of course yourself. So the point is, it's a good school, again, up for a Forecast Award. So don't diminish the fact that it's just Bloomsburg University.
No. I'm saying that was my totally 1000%. I promote it every time I talk, every time I speak. It's a fantastic program. I'm just saying that was my perspective at the time. I'm just like,
oh, absolutely,
tiny town in PA, like no one's gonna know where I'm from or what.
But that is important for people who right now are at that stage who might be listening, for them to know that, and that's the reason I'm emphasizing it, that feeling that Tarah had might be a feeling you're having about going to a school which you feel is unknown, but you're studying this digital forensics thing, that the fact that you have education in digital forensics is in itself a plus.
Absolutely, for sure.
So
apply for everything. That's my that's my mantra.
so then let's go the step beyond that, right? So now you're doing CT work. How do you wind up here at Magnet Forensics?
That's a Good question. Actually, a lot of it I feel like credits you and other employees at Magnet, to be completely honest with you. So I did CT work probably for 10 years or so in government, and we used Axiom all the time, in our work, and always were interacting with people like you and people and different sales reps and different forensicators within the community, or within the company rather. And I remember always getting this vibe like Magnet seems like such a great place to work. Everyone's so passionate and happy, and it just seems awesome. So um, I actually feel like I put some feelers out there to maybe you and another another sales rep that actually supported my lab at the time. And I was like, hey, if anything comes up, just let me know. He actually reached out and was like, hey, there's this position open at Magnet. And so it was actually, so funny enough, it was actually on the training team, and I went for it and I didn't get it. But God love Jamie Tubbs. He was like, there's this other position that I think you'd be really good for on the marketing team. And I was like, okay. So I went that route, and it worked out great because I absolutely love what I do at Magnet. I love the company. I love my colleagues. I love my job. I love everything about it. So I'm super, super thankful for the connections that I made throughout my job, or throughout my career, really, and with the company. So thank you, Jess.
Well, that's not just me. That's I would say, and not that this should be a Magnet love fest, but so I had my 4-year anniversary at Magnet on Saturday, and
congrats.
I would say I still have those same feelings, right?
Yeah,
Like I still feel like it's such a great place where we have lots of passionate examiners who are happy, all collaborating together to do
for
cool
sure.
stuff.
And note that I did not get my first job that I applied for at Magnet, but it still led me.
That's actually a good reminder to people too. I would say that we're highly competitive, but the reason you were referred was because your presentation skills were killer.
Thank you.
That you had delivered in your training. I was not at your training mock training session as part of your interview, but I heard all kinds of good things about it. I recuse myself. I know you, so I
yeah, no, I totally get that. I just want to highlight that because I'm like, keep trying, because I did not get the first role. Like I knew that Magnet was somewhere where I wanted to end up. I just felt like it was the right place for me, just based on the interactions that I have with, being a customer on that side of it and interacting with everyone that worked there. But regardless, I still didn't get the first role that I applied for. So
well, that's just a good note in life, right? That you're not going to get every position you apply for, and that's okay, because something better might come along in due time,
or something that just fits you better.
Or fits you better, right? So that kind of brings me to my next question. What are you working on now? What do you do? Which is a weird question for me to ask because I know exactly what you do. But if
what would you say you do here?
What do you do here? It's actually one of the hardest questions when people ask me, or for me to say about my role. Mm-hmm. But what do you do now in forensics in your current role?
It's really interesting, actually. I love being with Magnet in that it's a very varied role, really. Even though I'm on the marketing team, which means that I support the marketing message and making sure everything's technically accurate that goes out, and that we're not saying the wrong thing or sending the wrong message. I also present at conferences, as many know, with Mace getting famous, my cat Mace getting famous in my various presentations. So I present at different conferences. I get to attend different conferences as well. But I also get the advantage of working with the developers and the product managers and things like that, and actually shaping the product to what the forensicators need in the field. So I get that interaction with customers that can bring that feedback back. So that helps actually build the not just Axiom but all of Magnet products to what the actual community needs, which is so important, because at the end of the day, we're building these for the benefit of the community. So I get to do research on different artifacts that might come to fruition, and give those recommendations on how they actually look in the tools, which is really, really fun.
Yeah, it is kind of neat to get to play with things sometimes before they're released. or to see new features and things on the roadmap happening and taking shape. It's kind of,
especially when like I come from the customer side of it,
yeah.
and I know there's requests that I made as a customer, and now that I work there, I'm like, no, but seriously, you need to do this. And like in the next one or two releases, I'm like, oh, there's things that are coming that I'm so excited for, because I know when I was an examiner in the field as a customer, I was so amped for certain things to come out. So, so
It is so funny when a ticket that has your name on it from you suggesting it as a customer
yeah,
makes it into the product. It's
yeah,
definitely a very bizarre feeling.
so rewarding. Because you know how useful it's going to be. You know how much it's going to
Right.
help people in the community, which is really, at the end of the day, what you are aiming for.
So and just so people know, that means that when you're reaching out to Tara and you're telling her things, she's putting things in and explaining, not just, hey, this feature would be cool, but the why behind it. And the why behind it is what helps with prioritization. So it's actually really cool. I'd say in a lot of ways in Tara's role, I would think of you as an advocate for the forensicator, right? Because you advocate to marketing, and to be honest, and I know Magnet people are listening, but you flag out for marketing when they're wrong, right? Like if they misunderstood a feature and they're wrong. And then you advocate back to product about, because you're at conferences and you're interacting with people, a lot of times you're that touch point and you have the technical knowledge, so you're feeding back.
Yeah.
So I feel both like internally and externally, you play the role as an advocate for a forensics exam.
Kind of the go-between between the customer and the company, because the examiners within the company, and there's a lot of examiners in the company, as you know, just throwing that out there for the audience, but the examiners in the company have that technical knowledge, and we can be that kind of go-between between the two, which is so important.
So as a forensic consultant, sometimes you're doing forensic consulting to the community, but I would say a lot of times you're doing forensic consulting to the product teams, to the marketing teams, to the sale teams.
For sure.
If that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's almost like a bi-directional consultant role.
Sure.
Yep. So what things are you doing right now in that role? Are you, I mean, we're in the midst of a very heavy conference season right now.
Yeah.
Virtual. So what things are you involved with right now or upcoming for you?
Well, NCCC is this National Cybercrime Conference. Is this week. I'm presenting tomorrow on that. I'm really excited for the DFIR Summit at the end of this week. I'm not presenting, but I know you are, so I'm excited to see your talk with Aaron and a bunch of other talks too. Super excited for that.
I'm super stoked for the keynotes.
Yeah, for everything.
So Matt Mitchell is going to be giving a keynote, and it's all about how we can use DFIR differently and forensicating for good. He's like a hacker for good, if that makes sense.
That's cool.
And it's all about using forensics for social justice and Black lives, and really kind of goes with the message on your shirt. It says, be the change.
Be the change, yep.
just ways that we can use forensics in other ways to help other causes. And then the next day, the keynote is Dr. Owen Casey and Daryl Fife. And they're going to be talking about all of these ways that we can use forensics to build, and that we can build the future, and that we can bring things together. And I'm just so stoked, because I think they're both going to be so inspirational as to how we can use our skills. Does that make sense? And then tons of slew of these like deep dive technical talks, right? Like, so yeah, and there's going to be fun stuff. Sorry.
Shout out. I had the pleasure of having my good friend Sarah Konenchuk, who's also a Bloomsburg grad. She practiced her talk for the DFIR Summit with me and with her husband, and it's amazing. It talks about the difference between DFIR and e-discovery, and I'm really looking forward to that one. So definitely encourage you guys to check that out too.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm actually really stoked for that one, because I don't feel like, as a community, we utilize enough things that are already being used in e-discovery that could make us better or quicker, or like TAR 3.0 is amazing technology. It's targeted assisted review. And the way that it is utilized to score and rank content, it could be incredibly useful in from e-discovery platforms in forensics. I have no idea if Sarah talks about that in her talk.
Honestly, like I didn't really know a whole lot about e-discovery, but when I listened to the talk, I was like, wow, I'm learning so much, because like you think in DFIR, you think it's kind of similar, and I was just like, oh, there's actually a lot that I'm learning about e-discovery that I didn't know before. So I encourage you guys to check that out.
There's a really good blog post, I believe, by Brett Shavers, and Brett, feel free to share a link if you remember what I'm referencing. Where you kind of talk about what forensics is and forensics isn't, because obviously the definition of forensics has to do with things that are ready for court and preparing forensic evidence for legal proceedings. And then you talk about all of the other fields that use the same tooling, and sometimes the same process, but aren't forensics. And we sometimes like mentally lump these things together, and they're not. They can be very separate. And I've had some robust debate about the terminology and how we use it and what constitutes forensics and what doesn't.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
What's important to remember is that there are differences in nuance that we can learn from. So that's going to be that'll be really, really kind of cool. I'm also looking forward to Dave and Matt Sayer's talk, because they're going to be talking about live artifacts, and I'm just
my whole calendar for Thursday and Friday is completely full with all the talks I'm excited about. So that's such a good conference. So I'm looking forward to a lot of talks during.
Forecast awards at the end on Friday.
Yeah.
Sounds like
sorry, another shout out. Vote for Jess for the thing she's nominated for. Mentor of the year for sure. Social media contributor of the year. Sorry, I had to shameless plug.
Thank you. That's very, very
well
kind.
deserving.
To be honest, I'm just more than humbled that I was nominated. And so then after DFIR Summit, what happens next? This week I know is very intense, but what's kind of what are you looking forward to after that?
There's DFRWS, there's Diane Initiative, which is great. I submitted a talk for that, so I'm hoping to hear back about that soon. Techno is coming up in September. Just different research projects. I'm looking at the difference of data that you get between like mobile data versus cloud data, with like in regards to like Google Takeout and things like that. So that's kind of a research project that I'm working on right now too, and just supporting.
Tarah, we need to collaborate on that. I have a whole bunch of good stuff from the Chromebooks.
Yeah.
Where I was comparing what I was getting in Chromebooks between takeouts and what was on device, and I think we could collab on that and actually make that kind of a more super comparative, and
let's do it.
Which artifacts come from where. So
let's do it.
On site. So for people who don't know, kind of what happens is after Black Hat DEF CON Diana Initiative, which are in August, we kind of leave every conference season. OSDF Con still happens in the fall, but we go into what I like to call research season. Those are like the two seasons. There's you research a lot and you do a lot of work, and then you get to research all these fun things.
Different projects and stuff.
Then comes conference season in the spring and summer, but then like the fall and winter are just heavy research for us. So that's really, really cool. And DFRWS US is next week. That's going to be cool. That's a little bit different though, because it's like that intersection of academia and practitioners, because there's like academic peer-reviewed papers and practitioner content. The keynotes for that are Mary DeGrazia, who's been a guest, and David Cowan, who's been a guest. So both have been guests. And
both amazing.
Both amazing. I believe
I've watched every episode so far. Wow, you remember. I've watched every episode so far, and every single guest that you had on so far has been completely amazing. I loved every single one.
So something I ask everybody, and I'm really curious about this, and I actually think it's the most interesting question that we get to talk about, is what's your go-to resource?
As far as forensics or non-forensics? Because I have an answer for both. I have an answer for both. Which first?
Let's go non-forensics.
Okay. So in the past few months, there's this kind of motivational speaker slash researcher. Her name's Brené Brown. She's an author and she's written a ton of books. So one thing about my role at Magnet, which is totally different than my role in the last 10 years of government, is that I feel like I'm more out there and people are starting to get to know me, which is a really uncomfortable thing for me because I'm just not used to it. And I think everyone can relate in having some kind of vulnerabilities and imposter syndrome, almost like you're scared to put yourself out there a little bit. And so completely unrelated to DFIR, but like she talks about being vulnerable and how just kind of suppressing those vulnerabilities and putting yourself out there and forcing that is really the path to happiness and joy and success. So that has helped me a lot in my role now as it's totally unrelated to DFIR, but it's actually helped me actually like put myself out there a little bit more.
That's not totally unrelated, Tara. I would say that several of the things that you and I talk about when we're meeting is about overcoming imposter syndrome and putting yourself out there, and this concept that this is something that brings you joy when you overcome these things and do that. That is really an important, incredible point. It's something that you and I converse about a lot of times. How do we set those demons aside? Mm-hmm. And, you know, I've got my demons when I'm trying to work. I'm trying to push myself to do things that I've never done before. And as you do that and you expose it and you make it public, there's this concept of making yourself vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And if this is really about owning that vulnerability in order to fulfill yourself, I think that's such a fundamental truth. And it is about DFIR because it is part of, you know, if you found a new artifact and you're doing that first blog, and this is something I work with several of my students at GMU, mm-hmm. putting that blog out there is harder than doing the technical research. Hitting posts is what's hard. Because
absolutely.
The demons aren't in parsing the artifact. Mm-hmm. The demons are in putting your work out there.
Because what if I'm wrong? What if someone calls me out? What if this or that, the other? And the thing I've learned in the last couple years in putting myself out there a little bit more is that the DFIR community is so amazing and welcoming, and they're just like, everyone is just so willing to help and collaborate and everything like that. So that's made it a little bit easier, but at the same time, like you said, everyone has those demons of putting yourself out there because you always have the what ifs. And so, yeah,
so
I don't know.
I want to repeat this author's name because I need to look it up and I want to make sure I'm right. Brene Brown?
Yes, Brene Brown, Brene with a little asterisk or emphasis, accent. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah. So I'm almost done with one of her books, and that's essentially what it's talking about, is how to put those demons at bay, and the benefit of putting those demons at bay, and putting yourself out there.
I like the fact that it's not just about the fact that this is something that you can overcome. And, you know, I'm going to tell you, I speak all the time. I still get butterflies in my stomach. I still get clammy hands. I practice everything to death. I have a talk later today. I was practicing it at 5:00 this morning. So, and it's content I know, right? Mm-hmm. So everybody gets that, but you're right. Once you're through it, once you overcome it, that is so fulfilling. So hit post on that blog. We are a friendly community, and you know what we're going to do? We're going to validate your work, and we're going to build on it. And we're going to build on it, and we're going to reference you. And we're going to say, you know, Jill Smith, she went ahead and she did this amazing blog post, and it was specific to this specific version of iOS. It holds true on iOS 13.4 with app version 7.65. However, I've now looked at app version 6.7, and I've noticed this difference. And they're going to reference your work and build on it. And so please, please, please share, because get over it. Maybe get over that thing and put it out there, because I have this feeling in the back of my mind that there are tons of writings and videos that have been created that have not yet been shared because
for sure
people don't want to hit post.
I guarantee you're right.
If I can challenge anyone who's listening to this, if you are in that position, hit post. If you want to know how, reach out to me, reach out to Phil Moore, who's written a fantastic blog about how to post content out there.
Mm-hmm.
Reach out to Tarah. We'll encourage you to hit post. We're happy to review your work if you just need a second set of eyes on it. Most of us in the community will do that if that will help you feel better about hitting post. But hit post, we need your knowledge. Share
yes.
it.
We need your research. We need your knowledge. We need everything. Like, because it's impossible to know everything about everything when it comes to DFIR. So everything that anyone contributes is going to be helpful to the rest of the community. Hit post.
I'm gonna read Brene Brown's book now so that I can have this knowledge. And so you said that was your non-forensics related one, which we just completely turned into forensics. Okay. But I guess in terms of a more technical resource, what was your resource specific to forensics?
So my first job, my first lab, we had what I think it was a 10-minute rule, maybe 5 minutes, 5 or 10-minute rule. I very distinctly remember them telling me this rule when I started in this lab, and they were like, if you have a question, you have to Google it for 10 minutes, and you have to look at the SOP for 10 minutes, and if you can't find your answer, then you can ask the question. And so literally ever since then, that's kind of been my mantra. Like, I will do the research on the internet or whatnot to see if there's an answer to my question already out there. So Googling can obviously take you to many resources, blogs and white papers and whatnot. Obviously, you have to take into account the resource that you're looking at and the dates that it was posted, because it may or may not be out of date. But Google honestly is a great resource because it can take you to all these variety of different resources. But at the end of the day, if I can't find the answer, like we talked about earlier, Magnet has dozens of forensic examiners in the community. So like I said, I watched every episode of Cash up to this point, and I loved Heather Smith's answer last week, where one of her go-to resources was her coworkers, and I that holds true for me too. I go to you. I go to Mike Williamson, who was a guest on your show a few weeks ago. I go to my colleague Trey Amick, who's going to be a guest on your show in a few weeks. Lynn Hinch, who's going to be a guest on your show in a few weeks after that. So
November,
yeah, or whatever. But besides that, we have dozens of amazing examiners within the company who come from a variety of backgrounds, who have a variety of experience and knowledge that I love to just bounce ideas off of and collaborate with. So I'm really, really thankful that I have that resource available to me. So shout out to all the great forensicators.
Well, thank you, because I know I'm part of that coworker league, but likewise, right? Like, it's not even just bouncing things off in here, inside the walls of, Magnet Slack channel or whatever. It's the wider community for me.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So as in terms of a resource, when I'm looking at questions and I'm having trouble figuring things out, like, I go to people who I know are in that area. I mean, like you, I think I have more than a 10-minute rule personally. Like, I want to make sure that I've thoroughly researched. And usually by the time I go out with that question, I'm like, I can't find this anywhere. Does anyone know of a resource for this? Because that's, and hopefully somebody has a resource. And if not, that's the opportunity to collaborate and create it, right?
Then you research, right?
Then
it's your project.
It's your project now. Take responsibility, right?
For sure.
Question came up and I don't know how to do it. Now I have something to research and play and learn. And
now I need to figure out how to do it.
And so much of it is that, right? Because we're constantly running into new things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a really good point. So I know you can relate a little bit, but like in my background, it was so ingrained to like not put yourself out there and not be super part of
So to be blunt, when you're
social, really.
When you're in counterterrorism, you're told, do not have social media, do not post anything.
Yeah.
If you want to share anything, and I did presentations when I was in the CT field, but they all had to be vetted. And some of those vettings of my submitted talks or posts took 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
So it almost feels discouraged.
Yeah.
And I would say it doesn't necessarily have to be that way, if that makes sense. Like, there are ways that you can share that are appropriate,
right,
within your community, but there are ways that you can still ask questions that give no case details. You can have an anonymous profile in like the Digital Forensics Discord server, Twitter, and hear and listen and have technical conversations that do not pertain to methods, applications, or give away anything about the cases you're working on.
Right. But that's just like to that point, it was so like ingrained in me, like to not be that way. And then when I joined Magnet and they were like, you need a Twitter. And I was like, why? But then I joined Twitter and I was like, oh my gosh, there's this whole community of knowledge and just such a great like camaraderie and community and research and everything that people put out there on social media. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm like soaking it all in now because I'm like, I was missing this before.
I feel like we just kind of, because we both have that same background coming from doing CT work, that we might have made a negative statement there about the fact that CT is limiting. I've got to tell you, I loved my job every day.
Me too.
The mission was incredible. The work was incredible. If you were to ask me, Jessica, do you miss it? 1,000%.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Do I love what I do today? 1,000%. And I'm not looking to change it. But it's, yeah, I feel like no one, if you want to talk about fulfillment, that work was extraordinarily fulfilling.
For sure. For sure. But really, realistically, at the end of the day, regardless of what field you're working in, this work is so fulfilling because if you're in law enforcement or corporate or government, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a very fulfilling job because you actually feel like you're making a difference and you're helping people. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter. Like you have to be passionate about what you're doing, obviously, but regardless of what field you're in, we're still in this to make a difference to using our skill set that we have, which is amazing, which is awesome. So.
Yeah. So my only point are there are ways to still listen, even if you can't publish. Don't ever break the rules, but you can absolutely listen. You can and be anonymous and just listening, and you can absolutely share within your organizations. Find ways to share in your organizations.
Absolutely.
And be that resource to your coworkers and you'll develop those relationships. That's awesome. Yeah. So do you have an interesting experience from the field that you can share with us?
So I deployed twice to overseas in the Middle East, which is really, really interesting. I met some amazing people. And I think the most interesting thing about that experience was kind of gaining perspectives from people with various different backgrounds from all over the world, which is really, really interesting. So I always say one of the biggest challenges in coming from the roles that I had worked is the foreign language aspect of it.
Yes.
As you can probably relate to it, because forensics is DFIR is hard enough as it is, like getting the artifacts, putting the pieces together and everything like that. If you can read the language, but it's a whole nother layer of difficulty if you have no idea what the user created content is actually saying. So because of that, we had different linguists and things that we would work with that had such amazing backgrounds and experiences and just life events happen that I had the pleasure of talking to and getting to know, especially when I was overseas, and just kind of hearing their perspectives about the directions that their life had taken and why they were doing what they were doing, like the hardships that they had gone through growing up in the countries that I had been in and all those hardships and everything, and eventually making their way to North America. And now they're back, helping fulfill that mission in the way that they can because they want to make a difference, because they know the hardships that they had to go through. And that just like totally puts everything into perspective. It was like, wow, this is why we're doing what we're doing. And that's just my role in working CT. But like we just said, like it doesn't matter what role if you're doing law enforcement, helping victims, or even if you're in corporate and looking at malware, that can affect people's livelihood, So at the end of the day, having that perspective and what at the end of the day, we're doing this to help people. We're using our skill set to make the world better at the end of the day. So that's kind of.
So there's two things that you talked about that are so awesome there. One, you talked about the mission and then seeing other people fulfilling and touching the mission in different ways who had even more personal connection in that. That's awesome. But you said cued in on something that's interesting from a forensics perspective. That's something you and I share. We each spent close to 10 years working on data with no context. We
Yes.
could not understand the content that we were looking at and examining, which meant our reliance on metadata was heavier, right?
Yes.
We were solving entire cases based on the data about the data instead of the context. And I actually think that that's a really awesome way to learn forensics. I know that there are some people, and I'm not going to say it publicly because I'm not sure if he's comfortable with it, who are working on some CTFs in other languages in order to provide CTFs in the native language to those users. Mm-hmm. And I'm super stoked about it because I want to compete in that CTF because I feel like it's a better stretch of my skills to do things where I can't rely on keyword searching. I have no understanding of the message content, and I have to do true pattern of life analysis based on operating system artifacts and the order in which things occur, and more metadata. And I feel like it actually makes you a better, stronger, deeper examiner.
Yeah.
So I implore everyone to try doing cases that are not in their native tongue, because it gives you such a cool growth experience. And this could be anything from in law enforcement happening to work cases that aren't in your native tongue, to taking a role or doing a CTF or trying to do analysis of data sets that are in a foreign language, because it will really stress and test your skills. And we each spent close to a decade specifically working in that world. And I think it really, because sometimes I feel like it was a disadvantage because I didn't have that content analysis awareness. But in other aspects, I felt like it made me a deeper examiner because I had to rely on metadata. And I totally see that in you. And I know I've complimented you on that before in your work, and I was like, the reason that you attack that problem that way is because you're not used to having context.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually.
I think it's really cool because I think it actually changes the way in which you've attacked some problems that I've seen in your work. And I think it's really, really cool. So I encourage people, when that CTF comes out, I'll promote the hell out of it, as everyone knows. So watch out for it. It's probably a couple months away.
I'm excited for it. I want to do it. I want to participate.
But the whole point is put yourself out of comfort zones, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to learn things. And I would say having context is actually out of your comfort zone sometimes.
But on top of that, though, it also encourages a lot of collaboration as well. And not just collaboration with people who, are in the same field as you or we're doing the same work as you, but just as a whole, as a team, like everyone that you work with might have a different, one, perspective, and two, skill set that they can bring to your examination, even if they're not technical, even if they're not even if they're not, skilled in that area, they can still bring a lot to your examination. So utilize what you have at your fingertips.
Utilize the analyst, utilize the investigator, utilize, in the instance we're talking about, the interpreter or translator, but also utilize people who have different perspectives.
Yes.
I would say that one of the things that I found greatest in teams that I've had the luxury of working with is when I had diverse teams where I had people who maybe went straight through a digital forensics program like you did, Tarah, and maybe I have people who came from law enforcement, and maybe I have people who came from hardware engineering, and maybe I have people who came from software engineering. And those different perspectives between the investigative mindset, the pure, I learned forensics in school, or I was an academic mindset, the mindset of the software developer, the mindset of the hardware engineer, those people are going to attack that same problem differently. And when they all work together, you have the most unique and varied solutions, and we're able to overcome the toughest problems. And I'm sure there are many skill sets that I didn't include there, but I would say it's also one of the values of hiring lateral movers onto your team. Hiring people who have these different perspectives. If you find somebody who used to work in healthcare as a nurse, or you find somebody who used to be a pilot, or you find somebody who was in comms, whatever they were doing, that perspective is going to come through in ways you don't even anticipate and make your team better.
Even if they just approach a problem differently. They just have a different thought process or mindset or something. Yeah.
But if everyone's cookie cutter, right? Like if you say this is exactly, I would say this is, and maybe we should just jump into this question or
sure
or not. But, to me, that in hiring, a lot of people have these really, really, really scoped requirements, or a contract will have very, very specific requirements. And I would say allowing yourself as a hiring manager to deviate for somebody who has the thought process and thinks uniquely will put you in a better position than just somebody who checks the boxes.
Amen. Amen.
So on that note, in terms of things that are outside, right? In terms of things that aren't the check boxes, what makes Tarah tick outside forensics?
Outside forensics. Okay. Let's see. I love to travel, which it's killing me that we can't travel right now, but obviously we can't right now. But so I love to experience different things in the world and see different things, but obviously that's on hold for the foreseeable future. I love being outside. I love hiking and just being outdoors. I think most people know this about me. I love animals. I have, as you mentioned in my intro, I have tons of fur babies. I think we had talked about this a little bit before, but one of the biggest occupiers of my time in the last 3 weeks or so is that I've been fostering this dog that I found on the side of the road. Her name is, I'm calling her Blue. And I know there's probably going to be comments in the chat like, you're not fostering, you're going to adopt her. But yeah, so it's kind of swinging that way, but she's super sweet. So I've been working with her to, build up her confidence. I think she was abused probably prior to her coming with me, but she's getting healthy, and so I'm working with her to get her more confident and less timid, and just getting her healthy and everything. And we're definitely creating a bond. So I think she might be my dog from now on. That was not my intent. My intent was to just foster her and find her a home, but my first foster ever and my first foster fail, which is why I figured I wouldn't be able to foster, because I just love animals so much. So
you know what? I'm going to share something with you that was in the comments. Sarah, who I'm going to apologize for the third time mentioning that I don't know how to pronounce her name. Your last name. She wrote that you save cute dogs.
Aww, thanks, Sarah.
And David also says, "Hey Tara, you're killing it at Magnet. Miss you here."
Oh, thank you.
You know who that is.
Thank
and
you.
I'll take a moment to say thank you, Jay and Alexis, for your support in Mentor of the Year for the Forecast Awards. It's very, very good.
Well deserved.
Well, thank you. But we'll see how it goes next week. And I will say that I just mentioned Alexis's name. If you are looking at the Forecast Awards, look at what XLEAP can do. Look at the work that he's done and he shares with the community, and please consider him for Investigator of the Year.
Absolutely. I second that wholeheartedly. Alexis is amazing. He's such a great contributor to the community. I'm so thankful to know him and to be able to reach out to him and just collaborate with him.
There's one of those human resources outside of forensics who I consistently.
Absolutely.
So what advice would you give to someone who's looking to get started in digital forensics?
Let's see. So tons research on your own. Definitely do your own projects. The best way to learn is knowing what your own data is on your own devices, and just digging in and going head first into that type of activity. One of the biggest things I've learned since transitioning from the government role to my role at Magnet is how valuable networking is, because like we had talked about before, like I felt like I kind of shied away from that before. And now that I'm in this role and seeing how many amazing community resources are out there, like Alexis or Kevin or Sarah or anybody, Mari, any guests that you've already had on here or that's upcoming, how valuable those resources are in the community. Like I was always the kind of person that went to a SANS class and I would just do my thing, and then I would eat lunch by myself, and then I'd go back to class, and then I'd go back to the hotel room and just kind of keep to myself. And I kind of kick myself because there's so many opportunities that I could have had to connect with other forensicators and gotten that perspective and made those connections. And I didn't, it didn't click how valuable that was until coming into this role. So definitely that's probably my biggest advice based on things I wish I would have done differently is definitely network as much as you can. Because like I said, the DFIR community is so amazing. We're so collaborative, so encouraging of each other.
Yes.
Such amazing people within the community. So,
but even what you were saying, the reason that you came into this role here was
mm-hmm.
because of your network. And your network was smaller then, but you had a relationship with the sales rep. We had known each other. And so you had contacts here. And that's what allowed you to take that plunge.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
So, I mean, your network is what brought you here, but it's so key. I know a lot of forensics examiners who are undergraduates or are career transitioners who are going through certifications, and they're finding the ones that are networking are getting jobs because they're meeting people and they're talking to people. And it's not even just that person knows of a position and tells you it. It's that person is also hopefully going to motivate you to share your work. Mm-hmm. And when you share your work and you do that work and you're actually talking with other people in the field and you're collaborating and you're coming up with new ideas of new things that need to be tested and tried, and you collaborate and work together and put out work together, that gives you something for your CV that shows that you were doing work, even if it's independent research. And so much of that collaboration comes from networking, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that is one of the things I love, is working with other people and helping them get to that point of their first work, mm-hmm. right? And putting out their first work, which helps them ultimately get the job. But it's because of the network. Without that, it's really hard. Without the network, it's hard to fight the demons, to go full circle on what you were saying from Brene Brown's book, to get over that thing and find fulfillment. A lot of times your network doesn't just tell you about those opportunities, but inspires you and helps you technically, or submits with you on something, or collaborates with you, or answers that tough question that you didn't know how to get past, or even just
mentors you. Or mentors you.
or gives you just that input about, oh, this is how you set up a blog. Because sometimes those barriers are really, really small. And if you have that network and that support system, you're going to be able to put more content out there. And so you're right, the network, because a lot of times we tell people to do these things. Like, if you do this, it will help you. If you do that. But without the network, what do you have to help you get there?
And also, going full circle in my talk about the 10-minute rule or whatever, hiring managers are going to Google you. Yes. If you put work out there and you put research out there and you show that you're motivated to do that and do that work, even if it's independent research, even if it's in your off time, they're going to Google you and they're going to find you on the internet and be like, oh, this person's actually motivated. They've done this work in the field. They've already done this research in the field. And that's just one tick in the we should hire that person column.
I think I've spoken about this, but when I was a hiring manager, you're right. Just as much as I expect you to figure out who I am and to figure out what my organization does, and sometimes when you're working in CT, it's more fun to see what they figure out about your organization. But in general, I'm going to research that person. And if I find they have work, here's the other advantage. It's not just that I put a check in the box and I know that they're motivated and there's a couple of things. One, I know they have writing skills, and writing skills are such a critical part. I've had amazing examiners I've worked with who had weak writing skills, and we had to really work on report writing, because our product that we put out is oftentimes a technical report to a customer, to the investigator, et cetera. Our product is that report. If you can't write, it's a problem. So I have that check. I have that confidence that they can write based on what I read. So that actually gives me a really good confidence. The second thing is, I usually have a list of interview questions. And if I see they've done work in the field, I actually discard that list. And the questions I ask them become about their work, because I know that they can speak to it. It's something they know. I'm not going to accidentally get them with a gotcha question. If I don't know their background, or their background is very generic, because some resumes you look at, it's very generic. Okay, great. You know Axiom and NCASE and FTK and Celebrate, and you have a couple of certs, and you says you do forensics and you write reports on your results. It's a very generic resume. Checks all the boxes, but I don't know where your passion is. And I might inadvertently ask you a gotcha question, not because what I'm trying to get out of you is how you think. I'm not trying to check your knowledge, but I might inadvertently ask you something that throws you off or makes you uncomfortable because you're like, oh my gosh, I don't do Mac forensics anymore. I studied it. I don't remember what FS events are. I don't want to do that to you. Right. That's not my goal in the interview. My goal in the interview is to learn your mental process, and if you can do this, can figure out the unexpected, right? And if you have work and research that's out there, if you have that blog post, I'm going to ask you about that research. Mm-hmm. And then I'm not giving you a gotcha. I'm asking you something you have comfort in, and you're going to feel more comfortable in the interview. And not that all interviewers necessarily take the same process I did, but it's really, really good advice for those couple of other layers. It's not just the passion. It's I get a sense of your technical writing capability, and I can ask you about your own work.
And you can submit those things to any jobs that you're applying for too, which
absolutely
just boosts your resume, boosts your CV. So that just, helps you just have a leg up against anyone else that's applying for those jobs. So absolutely put yourself out there.
And when you mention CV, I will suggest that people continually update their CV at all times, not just when you're looking for a job. So every talk you do, every blog post you do, have a running CV. A CV is different than a resume, but have a running CV that has all of your content. And then you can pick and choose when you are ready, but you need CVs for other things. You need CVs when you're writing your bios, when you submit a talk. You need CVs if you're applying to join, let's say, the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. I had to send them a CV when I became a member of that organization. There are lots of instances where I've been asked for a CV just in terms of being qualified to join a working group that was in digital forensics. So I truly would like to say that that's something you can keep running. And even if you're in school, even if you're a Latin mover who's trying to learn content off of all the free resources on the internet, even if you are just hacking away and learning about this in your passion time, every class you take, everything you write, every piece of research you do, it doesn't matter if you're working in the field, those things build your time and experience. That is
absolutely.
So
Preach.
you gotta prove it though. And the blog post.
Preach. No, totally agree with you 1000%.
No, and that's I think you're spot on with the network, and it is one of the most important things that we can build. And I would say on that, Tarah's Twitter handle is right there. And I always accidentally type Meltdown Tarah because we did an internal CTF where they gave us all different names, and Tarah was Tarah Meltdown. It was like supposed to be
like a DJ name.
Yeah, like a DJ name. And they put Tarah Meltdown, so I accidentally now never type Tarah Melton. I type Tarah Meltdown. So there's my little piece of information.
Just change my Twitter handle.
You should call it Tarah Meltdown. So her Twitter handle is underneath her name, and I know I mess it up and say Tarah Meltdown. So please look at her Twitter handle there and connect with her, and I'm sure she'll be more than happy to answer your questions and connect with you. I as well, and so many other people in the community.
And I don't claim to know everything, but if I don't know, then I will hopefully be able to connect you to someone who can help you. So please reach out. I'm welcoming any communication with open arms. So I'm not going to encourage networking and then dismiss networking with me, obviously. Please, I'm so happy to talk to anybody and communicate with anybody and collaborate. So please feel free to reach out to me.
I feel like I have to give a little, Mike Williamson just put DJ Hyde in the comments. So each of us who were competing in this CTF had a name, and what was Mike's? Was he MC Mike, or was he, I feel like it was something different. I think it was MC McQuaid. And what was Mike's?
MC Quaid was
MC Quaid was McQuaid, yeah, Jamie McQuaid. And what was Mike's? Because we were the four who competed in the challenge. We did a live CTF in front of our developers so that they could watch our process. So our screens were live on a big screen, and our entire dev team was there watching it. Jad was emceeing over us and like interrupting us and trying to screw us up while we were competing in the CTF. And what was interesting was the four of us each created the images and questions for the other people, and you drew out of a hat whose image and questions you got. So we were.
It was very nerve-wracking.
It was a lot of fun. Our developers learned a lot about our mental process, and that's what Jad was trying to get out of us. So it was really a cool event. McQuaid took first, right?
Yeah.
I know I took second. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. And Mike, I can't remember your name. Oh, it was Mixmaster Mike.
That's right.
The fact that Mike wrote Mixmaster Mike. I don't know, LOL. But Kevin's gonna buy our mixtape. So so we all need to put
Amazing. Amazing.
Tarah Melton. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you had a good time, had a great time chatting with you. I hope the rest of you enjoyed this conversation and some of the wisdom that Tarah has shared, everything from Brene Brown to networking. And if you want to learn more, please, about other great forensicators, please join us for future episodes of Cash Up. Next week, I have Alexis Brignoni on Tuesday morning. I might have scheduled that intentionally because my goal is to have the Investigator of the Year announced on Friday on the show on Tuesday. So I've been hedging my bets. So good luck, Alexis. Alexis will be our guest next Tuesday morning. And then coming up after that, we have amazing guests, Joshua Hickman, Richie Cyrus, Cindy Murphy, Trey Amick, Elon Wright of D4Diva, James Duffy, Devin Ackerman, Madrina Sharon, Kelly Geisbrecht, Mitch Kaiser, Saliba, Veronica Schmidt, Shanna Daly, Kevin Brightwell, Rob Duhart, Geraldine Blay, Brian Moran, Lenita Hinch. So, I mean, we're scheduled out through near the end of the year. Really excited to talk with everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Tarah. Hope to see you next week for Alexis Brignoni's talk, and I'll definitely see you all at the D4 Summit, hopefully. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Jess.